Oh yeah, here we go, gang. Check us out. We're in Golden Boy. It's just you and me this week. Just us guys. Just you, the audience, and myself. Solo blast episode. No guests this week. We're just gonna do some housekeeping. Touch base about UFC 229, of course. Crazy event there. If you guys watched it with me, and then who knows? We'll just go into whatever the fuck ever. You guys, all right, that's probably enough for now. I'm not gonna make you listen to this entire set. That was Eelke, Kleijn. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. He's got a really Scandinavian name. From Burning Man. I am just all about it. Deal with it. People always get sick of fucking hearing about Burning Man, but that was the Tuesday night set that we actually attended, and I've been kind of vibing out on it lately. And house music's kind of interesting like that because it just takes a while to build. There's not enough I could even share with you without making you just listen to 17 minutes of music that is going to make sense, right? So, but I think that's interesting. That's like why house music is sometimes that's what you can appreciate about, everything kind of brings its own culture to the table. And what does house music bring? It brings like this long line of you kind of have to, I don't know, you have to commit to listening to it for a little bit longer. If you have a really shitty attention span, like most of us do, especially in this day and age, then you might have a hard time appreciating music that takes more than 30 seconds to pay off and drop or change from verse to chorus or from chorus to bridge or some shit. But I challenge you for that reason to fucking try it out. Just listen to fucking house music. God, I'm cursing a lot right now. Just listen to it. Just try it out and see if you can try to appreciate it. I don't know. There's something interesting about having to hold your attention for longer and pay attention to the subtle differences. It's kind of like deeper listening in some ways. And I'm going to stop jerking house music off right now, but I just think it's interesting, all right? Deal with, God damn it. I've been too apologetic on previous episodes, I think, so I'm trying to be in your face now. Take that. Some of my friends and listeners have mentioned this to me, and so I'm taking the feedback with and taking it forward with me in these next episodes. But anyhow, let's get into it. And we'll get that payoff real quick too, because I'm gonna give you guys the drop. I'm going to give you guys that drop. I think the house music is a good story for kind of what's happening and why maybe, all these things kind of like spawn out of different areas of culture and out of necessity, I feel like. So we need, I've been saying it over and over past weeks, we need to embrace more nuance, more subtlety in our minds and in our discussions. And that's what this podcast has partly been about. Everyone wants to pick a camp. Like this is like why I think the Conor Khabib thing was so interesting, and what's the aftermath and like the whole situation. Like again, first of all, the whole story of it, you had to keep your eye tuned in for years to really see and appreciate the story. Like as much as the event has been building for, whatever the last 10, 12 weeks or a few months, if you guys have been paying attention to the UFC, it's been building for a lot longer than that. And just like this song has been building for, minutes now behind my voice, you'll be able to like I couldn't play that whole thing for you. I have to get into the topics, but I think what's interesting about this Conor Khabib thing is that you fucking get this huge payoff if you've actually been paying attention for longer. Because there's so much context and like I really won't be able to explain it to you unless you're a fan and you're a longtime follower of the UFC. I suggest you get into it. Again, one of these, like, get into house music, get into whatever the fuck it is that you're actually interested in. Like, go balls deep on it because the payoff is way better. And it's kind of wild to digest, because this UFC 229 shit is just still, I'm kind of floored by it, but also like it's perfectly expected, because in the absence of nuance, we all jump into tribes, right? And that is kind of the story of this whole thing, and like how it can get out of hand, and why things eventually like blew up in our faces as fans and as people that run the UFC and everything else. So well, let's let this drop blow up in our face right now, and then we'll get back into it. I like this kind of music every so often. It's weird for me to listen to it when I'm not at the concert as much, but it's growing on me. It's a nice background. It's nice, gets your mind kind of on that long form thought. You know, we all have such goldfish attention spans these days. It's just nice to start exercising that longer form thought. But anyhow, let's get back into it. So what I was saying is this tribalism, right? This is like how things can culminate, and like why I think I haven't had really enough time to think about this and formulate the best thoughts, but Conor and Khabib's story is so long and so textured, you could say, that I won't be able to really discuss everything here, but let me try to like put it into words here. So basically, like, Conor's been betting on himself, right? This whole time. Like, the reason why things get crazy, and I don't know if you guys don't know, here's what happened. Conor got basically mauled, and I'm not that surprised. Obviously, I'm the huge Conor fan that I am. I'm very upfront about that with you guys. I tell you how much I'm a fucking Conor dick rider all the time when I'm talking about the UFC and fighting. But and so I don't always, and especially since this isn't a, you guys don't necessarily come here for mixed martial arts analysis. You come here maybe more for if you really want that, if you're coming here for that, you should watch some other podcasts with people that are much more knowledgeable than I am about this shit. But for a lot of my friends, I am like the go-to dude to talk about these things with, because I've been into the UFC for longer than they have been. So needless to say, I'm a huge Conor fan, and so I didn't like necessarily, obviously I'm the way I talk about it and the way I think about it is I'm hopeful that Conor's going to do what he says he's going to do, but I knew this was a high probability, and that's again like why I'm a huge Conor fan, because I know Conor knows this better than as well as anybody, that he was up against basically the worst matchup possible, and he was willing to go in and fight Khabib anyhow. Which he didn't have to do. Like, ultimately, he's already got $100 million in the bank. He wants the biggest challenge. He wants to go after glory, and he's willing to put it all on the line. And that's really been Conor's story, and that's like why you can be a Conor fan and why there is so much excitement about all this, is like he's been building this story like since he's been in the UFC, even before that. Like, if you've really followed Conor's story along, it's an incredible story, the way he's bet on himself consistently, just over the years, constantly raising the stakes and basically getting it all done as well. Like, up until a certain point, like, obviously he lost the Nate Diaz fight, the Floyd fight, and now the Khabib fight. So things have kind of boiled over for the momentum that he's created and him trying to outdo himself. But ultimately, what was so exciting about watching Conor exceed and go for it, and why a lot of people didn't understand it necessarily, but why you want to be a Conor fan, is he was basically riding like this magical tale for himself, where he would stack all these chips, like go all in on these huge, increasingly higher and higher bets on himself, where basically he's having to just work his ass off behind the scenes and give this illusion that he's reckless and whatever, but he's doing the work to become one of the greatest mixed martial artists we've ever seen in the octagon, and simultaneously stepping up and betting on himself in a way that no fighter has ever done before, where he's saying what he's going to do, telling people he's going to knock people out, talking a bunch of shit, like being flashy, and with that, he brought himself into a level where he's making hundreds to tens of millions of dollars on fights. He's elevated the game of mixed martial arts to a stage that no one could have ever predicted. It was unprecedented, and without him, it wouldn't be where it is today. And that's why you get on the Conor Dick train, is because you appreciate what he's done for the sport. You appreciate what he's doing for MMA and the UFC. And yeah, of course, we don't always agree with like how it gets done. Obviously, Conor has crossed the line on a number of occasions. But if you're, I mean, some people just, it's not their cup of tea. Ultimately, there's a lot of people that hate on Conor. I get more inspired, and I think there's majority of people get inspired by his story and the work ethic that if you know and you watch the game, you appreciate what had to have gone in to each of these moments to give this illusion of, that people can hate on. Because if anyone truly understood it, they, obviously they're full of shit. If you're hating on people, generally you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, right? So, but I don't know. Where am I at with this? So then, so Conor's been building this huge moment, right? He's been stacking the chips against himself. He's been taking on challenges, being, in a way, yeah, he was reckless, but instead of like being reckless, and he capitalized on the recklessness as much as he could, and it's been working out. Like, he was able to work hard enough to beat all his opponents up until the Nate Diaz fight, which again he took last minute. He was preparing for a different opponent, and of course Nate Diaz did too, but Nate Diaz is larger. Like, again, he's taken these big challenges. He's never lost when he's been expected to win, necessarily. Like, maybe the Nate Diaz fight, no one knew, but he was an underdog on Saturday. He was an underdog in the Floyd fight. It's not like he's ever set himself up for like chill success. He's always taken on a bigger challenge, and he's been willing to eat the consequences. And every time he's failed, he's been very humble in defeat. So that's just the case for, like, again, why I'm still a Conor fan, why I'm still a big, and I was a little disappointed in the outcome, obviously, but not surprised. Like, honestly, I knew that could happen. I wish, and Conor looked good, but he didn't look like his former self. He hasn't fought in MMA for 2 years. He's versing literally the greatest, maybe, lightweight we've ever seen in the octagon. And obviously he won one round, maybe, arguably a lot of people gave him the third round, which, is one of the few, if only rounds that Khabib has ever lost ever. Which again it's its own little victory. But it doesn't mean shit. And I know it doesn't mean shit to Conor. Ultimately, like, what he wanted and what we all wanted as Conor fans is to see him perform at his best and win, hopefully against this opponent, and keep the story going, because the story now has to be rewired, or like repositioned if he wants to come back and make a rematch against Khabib, which, that's an enormous uphill battle. But it's already being talked about. So it's liable to happen. There's too much money at stake. Now there's even more fucking hype behind it because, again, Conor got choked out or neck cranked out in the fourth round, roughly. It was kind of like a combination. He got mostly his takedown defense looked really good. Like, he was stuffing Khabib a few times, and Khabib, for someone who's been off for 2 years, was making Khabib work harder than you might have expected. He was maintaining his composure, but I'm really riding Conor's dick again too hard right now. Like, all credit due to Khabib as well, because Khabib put up a ridiculously high level performance, like what you would expect out of him. He did everything right. He probably landed one of the biggest shots in the entire bout, if not the biggest, with this huge overhand right flush on Conor's face. And that was set up again by the threat of the takedown. And it just goes to show that wrestling is just this huge crux of mixed martial arts, where if you don't, if you can control where the fight goes, or if you have the threat to take someone or your opponent down, it opens up your striking, even if you're not the more talented striker, because you have this threat of the takedown. These are things that if you've been following the sport, you already kind of know, but I know there's people out there that don't necessarily have the expertise that are listening. So, there's all these factors that go into it. And, but Khabib, had just like basically a perfect performance. He he took Conor down early. He wore him out. He smashed on him in the second round. Put some damage on him. Conor looked good, enough in the third round to start making his way back and taking a round. And his cardio looked like it was somewhat there still, which, again, there's questions about Conor's cardio always. But Khabib is with the DC, the AKA camp, American Kickboxing Academy. That's DC, Daniel Cormier. He's a light heavyweight and heavyweight champion currently. And Luke Rockhold and former champion Cain Velasquez. Like, maybe not Luke Rockhold so much, but they're known for putting on their fucking insane pace. Like, they get injuries. Their camp is known for having injuries all the time because they just put on a ridiculous pace on their opponents. It's absolutely mind-blowing. The only person that on that card that we saw that put on a pace similar was Tony Ferguson, which was ridiculous. But we'll get into that maybe a little bit. But then in the fourth round, again, like the takedown, the wrestling was just too much. Conor got taken down again. Like, regardless of how he was doing on the feet, it wasn't enough. Khabib's chin was tested, his endurance was tested. Like, I thought it was a great fight. It was pretty decidedly Khabib's fight, but if anyone could come back and do a rematch and surprise everybody, it could be Conor. I think, he loves a challenge. He loves this idea of, obviously he went back. He wanted Nate Diaz back at 170, where he was probably. I mean, Conor's smaller, than Khabib and much smaller than Nate as well. Like, none of Khabib nor Nate could ever make 145. They definitely couldn't. They're not the same size in some ways. So there's a size disadvantage for Conor, and he's willing to take on these big challenges, but it'd be rough. It'd be hard. He'd definitely be an underdog going into the Khabib fight again. There's no doubt about it. But it's liable to get made just because there's insane hype. So, of course, if you don't know, which, again, I probably should have led with this, but if you don't know, the fight after it was over, and there's been mad buildup, right? There's been bad blood between these camps. Khabib slapped one of Conor's friends and teammates. Then Conor obviously threw the dolly at the press conference, or after the press conference back in whenever the fuck that was, and all these antics have built this thing up, and now Khabib finishes Conor with this amazing performance. And then, there was this other question of, did Conor get in Khabib's head? Well, obviously he did, but it didn't. And then this is something I've heard from Luke Thomas and other MMA analysts, Ariel Hawani, MMA journalist. It's just kind of obvious, but the way that Khabib actually responded to Conor getting in his head was not to fucking. He didn't get the moment get to him. He didn't let the moment really get to him as much as he just got more pissed off in rage mode, and he had the energy after whooping Conor to go out and now pick a new fight with Conor's jiu-jitsu coach Dylan Dennis, who was talking mad shit after the fight was over, and he fucking jumps out of the octagon. The fight's over. All he had to do, and there were so many moments like this on the night, all he had to do was just take it. He could have really stolen the show in some ways. And now the show is not even about his victory and his legacy as much as it's about this crazy controversy where he jumps out of the octagon. He does this running, flying kick towards Dylan Dennis, and then they get in a brawl, and then a fucking fight breaks out. Conor is, exhausted in the octagon, and Khabib's two teammates, and one of them I think is his brother or some shit, they come in and like blindside try to jump Conor and hitting him in the back of the head. It's fucking unbelievably, like, I mean, that was the true low point. I mean, Khabib attacking another mixed martial artist who's talking mad shit, like, in Dylan Dennis. It is what it is. Like, the fight game is fucking gnarly. I mean, we have Mike Tyson biting Evander Holyfield's ear off. We've got fights breaking out all over combat history, right? Obviously, lots of people were disappointed. People were shitting on Khabib. But ultimately, that I think was the worst thing, is just the fact that and there's rumors. I mean, this is all conspiracy, so fuck that. But like, regardless, they jump Conor. It's a super cowardly, and Joe Rogan said on the podcast, it's a cowardly thing to do. I mean, to just blindside Conor after he's already just lost an exhausting 20-minute fight. I don't know. That's But that's their culture again, and that's what comes in. That's where I started out talking about this tribalism. This culture, it's a kind of a culture war. It's this war of ideas. It's just like this ancient. It's these things that are as old as time. Is like these differences in ideas. The Khabib value structure, where he comes from Dagestan. It's all about honor and respect. And ultimately, he fucking pissed on his own culture by throwing this moment away, and not having the respect and not showing the honor in martial arts. And it's just like that's like what's just a strange thing is like Conor has like this weird victory in a way over Khabib, in that he was able to make Khabib lose his composure in like the worst fucking way possible. But it's weird because Khabib cares more about that, but Conor probably gives no. Conor actually, has been said. We haven't heard him like speak in an interview yet. Conor gives no shits about the composure and any of that. He wanted to win the fight. Like he didn't press charges to the guys that jumped him. He doesn't give a fuck about the. He's about the legacy. He's not there. He's already got hundreds of millions in the bank, especially after this fight, which he's going to make another ridiculous sum on. It's for both these guys. It's about legacy more than it's about money or anything else, or it's about honor. Like Khabib wants to be known as the greatest of all time. Conor wants to be known as the greatest of all time. But the culture is what's different, right? So like Conor is willing to say whatever the fuck ever leading up to the fight. For him, the Irish culture, it's say what be a complete jackass. Do whatever you want, like make a huge show, spit hot fire all the way up into the competition, talk about his family, talk about his religion, talk about all these politics. Like there was too much for me to follow, but needless to say, he's talking the most amount of shit that's been talked in a long time. And that's one way to do it, right? And this is something that we've seen for a lot of great combat artists, Muhammad Ali, of course, notorious for similar antics, like being crazy, talking mad shit. In Khabib's culture, it's like don't say anything, be respectful all the way up until, or be respectful at all times. But then, what was I going to say? Jesus Christ, guys, I'm losing my train. Losing my trizzle of thought here. Khabib's culture, it's all about honor and respect. And so the fact that Conor is willing to say all these things, like it's deeply personal, like for the Irish, for the Western world, maybe more even, like, I don't know if you can call Dagestan not the Western. I don't even know what it would be called. I mean, just that part of Russia, it's definitely like a different style of value structure. And so for them, you don't say any of that shit. Like, words are not forgotten, obviously. And leading up to this fight, they both said that this shit is not over. It ain't ever over. Never, ever, ever over is what Conor said, which is hilarious because clearly it wasn't. And it's just wild to see that, Khabib was pushed to the brink where he blew his moment. He blew his moment and lost the composure that he's been known and he'd been building his whole career on as being this respectful, honorable guy, and he fucked it all up. Whereas Conor has been building his career like as basically fucking it up in front of your face in a way, but he fucked up in betting too much on himself this time, betting too much on the Irish whiskey and like all these other endeavors that, ultimately pulled energy away from his mixed martial arts training and landed him with a loss in the octagon, right? I mean, say what you will, like maybe Khabib would never lose to Conor. Maybe Conor could never beat him no matter how much he trains. Khabib has been, and that's what's so fascinating. And that's like why, again, these stories, like Conor has been building and like kind of betting on himself and like getting like doubling his chips and doubling himself, whereas Khabib is not gambling, in a way. Like his whole culture is just go to work, like he's just been slowly building and investing in a mutual fund or some shit and just being cold and like very linear in his progression just towards the top. And he's obviously had setbacks and stuff, but Conor's been kind of like jumping and like doubling down on himself it's just two different approaches to the game, two different cultures. It's a wild thing. That's why the story, even without all the bad blood, was so interesting. Is just the way that these fighters are. It didn't even need all that, but I mean, it's just blown me away. I mean, I would listen to Brendan Schaub's take on it and Below the Belt. I would listen to Ariel Helwani, his latest episode. Joe Rogan just had Conor's coach on. I haven't listened to that yet, but there's so many great materials out there that are going to give you better insight than I possibly could into the UFC and into MMA and into this whole situation. I just think that, like, if you guys really are really interested, if you really care, then you should start to check out some of those things like I do. I love a lot of these podcasts. I love a lot of, the fight game. I'd like to be, the guy that could to talk about it. But I know that really I'm not the person that you guys need to be listening to on this. But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I maybe need to do a Q&A or something, or a comment episode. I just think that, mostly I'm just going to be only being able to regurgitate what I've already heard from a lot of these guys, because, my take on it is not going to be anything that you're not going to hear from any one of those places. I just think it's just fascinating to see the culture war. And ultimately it's like these tribe things. It's just, oh man, I had a thought on it and I kind of lost it. I was just driving around earlier and I just thought that, we all get on team. I got on team Conor. Like I'm still in like this tribal mode. Like that's the instinct, right? And it's like this uphill battle. We're all fighting against our own evolution to embrace this nuance. Like I wanted to embrace nuance in my thinking, but my DNA is hardwired to not think that way. And like this is what's so fascinating, I think, is, people want to shit on Khabib and Conor, but ultimately both of these guys are have incredible stories. They're both great dudes, and they're both human, And like Khabib's not perfect, obviously. Like he blew his fucking moment, and he's subject to this whole story that Conor's built, got in his head, and blew his whole moment up. And Conor's maybe more overtly, shows his faults and it has over the years, but if you also pay attention, that he never would have done that. Like they're in different situations, they're going to behave differently. They're showing their faults and their glory in different ways. And, that's what's so fascinating about the fight game. That's what's so fascinating about just life, is just each individual story and each individual's personality and what they bring to the table, the energy they bring. I mean, like I said, they like that. It's a tale of like who wants it more, and ultimately Khabib wanted it more in a different way, and his route was just more savagely grinding towards it over years and years, and like his style of fighting is just not flashy, not it's not gonna draw attention to you until the very end. Like it doesn't pay out until you fight Conor McGregor. And without Conor McGregor, like even Khabib would never have the name that he has. So it's weird, like they have to complement each other too. It's like, Conor represents things that, a lot of people have a problem with, maybe like flashiness, money, being cocky, blah, blah, blah. But without that, who's bringing attention to mixed martial arts? Would you know about Khabib? Would you care about fighting? And it's all like that yin and yang and shit. It's all that duality. And we have to find that line, ultimately we got to ride that curvy line in that yin yang symbol, just waving at each other, if we want to move forward with balance. But yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, guys. I'm getting wild with it. Needless to say, it was an epic night, though. That's all I can say. Like it's crazy. I expect the controversy afterwards. It's definitely not a good look for mixed martial arts, but again, with the duality, it's going to probably create more buzz, and it's going to set the scene and story for the next fight if they do have a rematch. It makes this possibility. I mean, if Conor, it makes that all the more juicy. If Conor, for me, I'm already, Conor Dick Rider, I'm going to fucking be thinking about like Conor's comeback. He's had like these huge knockdowns. And you might see a more humbled Conor, because maybe it takes more energy. Maybe he's going to take a page out of Khabib's book. It's going to take more disciplined, humbled, respect respectable approach to the game to get back to where he wants to be. Strangely, you know, Khabib obviously loses, but also gains like a lot of weight by doing this crazy shit. You know, he loses a lot of respect to mixed martial artists. A lot of people are shitting on him, but ultimately we all, and I think this is something that Brendan Shaw brought to the table that I was just listening to, which I think is a huge point, and I'll try to be my last thing on this, is just we all watched that shit because we were, you know, it's incremental. Again, like we're in this age of nuance, you kind of like don't know. And that's the thing is like that's the problem with the nuance. That's why people want to jump into camps and be like, make hard and fast rules. You can't say this. You can't do this. Like there are people saying, oh, we need to maybe call for, you can't talk about people's religion or politics or their family and shit in leading up to fights and promo press conferences. But that's fucking, that's horse shit. You know, like ultimately, again, we have to value, you know, in my opinion, we got to value the freedom of the speech and stuff. We can't, if you start to make rules and you're going to lose, you're going to create a tyranny, you know, you're going to create a bad situation because you can't make it perfect. But with the nuance, with this ability to kind of say whatever the hell you want, Conor was slowly able to just take us all down this road where we all got it, where it was all okay, even up to the dolly point, even up when he threw the dolly. Like there weren't really any repercussions. Everyone's making more money. There's more eyes, blah, blah, blah. He pretty much got away with it. Obviously, he ate millions of dollars from like deals and lawsuits and stuff. But, you know, the public view had not completely shifted. And so we get to this point where you end up crossing the line. You end up crossing a line, and then we all kind of know where the line is. And this kind of felt sour, right? It left a sour taste in everyone's mouth, even if it's going to be good for promotion in the future. It just felt like, fuck. All right, we all crossed the line. And we all hold that responsibility ultimately because we all played into it in one way, shape, or form. We were all down, you know? And I'm like a little bit less. I'm a year younger, not even. I'm a few months younger than Conor, and I barely know what the fuck is going on. Like I can't imagine what it's like to have $100 million in the bank, and you know, being this mixed martial arts legend already. So I think you know, luckily, ultimately, it's just the fight game. And, you know, as bad as it got, it didn't really get that bad. You know, there was basically no serious injuries. Conor's fine. Khabib's fine. Dylan Dennis they're all going to be okay. You know, there was a crazy hustle or you know, no innocent people really got injured or anything. Like there was some fighting after. I saw some videos in Vegas, people like beating the shit out of each other. But, you know, again, they're probably asking for it, being drunk in the streets and causing a ruckus. That's what it looked like to me. So ultimately, we're gonna move forward. But you know, that's why we need the fight game, and this is why the fight game is so strange to me. And sometimes I have mixed feelings about it. Like we saw on the undercard, some guy got knocked out, just flatlined. Basically, he had like 2 completely unanswered punches to the dome, just his head bouncing off the canvas like a basketball. And, you know, there's extreme violence in this stuff. Derek Lewis landed this ridiculous combination on Alexander Volkov all in the last 11 seconds of the fight. And if you know Derek Lewis, his fucking post-fight interviews are ridiculous. So you get to check that out. I mean, it was just insane. He's going to go on Joe Rogan's and smoke some weed, as he put it. Smoke some weed with you. And Derek Lewis is a national treasure. You guys all need to be following that man. But these, I think that's like why I think the fight game, and you know, it's like this metaphor, right? It's this place where we can put our energy. Like it's weird. Like there's a need for violence potentially, and hopefully, you know, it doesn't have to be that way. But again, it's our DNA. We're fighting this uphill battle. We need to have outlets for aggression. We need to have outlets, healthy outlets for ourselves as a society to, you know, that's what competition's been about. It's like, all right, let's maybe stop murdering each other and killing each other in wars. A little less of that, a little more competing and putting that energy and fighting spirit into games like team sports and mixed martial arts and parkour. And I don't know that we get to separate ourselves from that yet. Like, you know, a lot of people want to think their way out of their humanity in some ways or their biology. And it doesn't work, like if you try to logic your way out of your DNA in some ways, I think this is like something that I've heard from a lot of tech billionaires and stuff like this is like, I just listened to Tim Ferriss on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. I've listened to Elon Musk talk about this. And it's interesting that like all these guys, even though they become like insane, like moguls or legends in tech or in very modern technologies or very modern lifestyles, like entrepreneurial endeavors, it kind of always comes back to this idea that they have to make peace with their emotions and being just like, what was I saying? Jesus Christ. Just like one with their bodies and like not trying to logic their way out of things, but also feel and not trying to make sense and argue their way through Jesus, what am I saying? I've been losing it, guys. I'm going on tangents, but basically just, we want to just say, oh, we're not this way anymore. We're not violent anymore. Well, maybe we are still. So instead of trying to lie to ourselves and be like, we're not a violent society. We're not going to have UFC. We don't need to do anything where people could get injured, blah, blah, blah. Like if we tried to nerf the whole society, we're probably going to create more problems than we're solving, right? That's my intuition anyway, is that if you try to contain, something that is producing consistent energy, the human, like a biological entity, like if you try to box it in, you're going to just build pressure and it's going to explode. So that's why I think, even though I have mixed feelings sometimes, because like I love the UFC, I really do, but also I recognize how fucking insanely violent it can be, and people are getting brain damage from my enthusiasm in some ways. Like I am stoked, and I'm paying their purse and their checks, by buying pay-per-views or whatever. And some of these, at every fight, someone wins or loses, and sometimes in the worst way. So we all kind of like have to hold a responsibility for it, because, I'm getting to channel some of like my energy out probably invariably by watching these events, so that, maybe if I watched less UFC, I could train harder. Who knows? By that logic, I don't know about that, but because I think I find a lot of inspiration too and motivation from seeing someone go through what is clearly a more gnarly and more inspiring, in my opinion, situation than basically almost any other athlete faces, which is you're literally getting the shit kicked out of you. And that's like, again, why I find it so inspiring. And if you don't draw the positive energy from that, if you only sit in the bloodbath energy, that's maybe where you can go wrong, is because if you're just out for blood and you watch UFC to see people get murked and stuff, you might be a bad person. I think you have to be, or maybe not. Maybe that's just what you like to do, and you have to get all your aggression out there, and then you do a lot of good shit. Again, but this is what I'm saying: is you can't just lie to yourself and pretend that it's all good. I'm made of milk and honey and blah blah blah. You gotta embrace the dark side sometimes, or at least understand it and channel it into something healthier. So, what am I saying here? Fucking basically nothing, but I just mad respect to MMA athletes for inspiring me and going through, basically a tiny version of war for us, so that we don't have to have, in some ways, I think it helps us not have real wars, and I think that all athletes, that's one of the things that we're doing, is we're all get to live vicariously through the dangers that they're facing, and, whatever that does for our own human spirits and stuff, I don't know, but we're getting really esoteric now. So let's just go to the next tingy. But just big ups to the UFC, because I think this is just a wild time to be a MMA fan and a boxing fan. We got Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury coming up. Holy shit. There's another one with a crazy story that I wish I was following for longer. I wish I was following Tyson Fury for longer. I know he's got a ridiculous story. And he's a poster child for a lot of different things, because he's been like, he's got horrible mental, like bipolar or depression or like manic depression issues that he's been dealing with his entire career. And like he lost the belt and ballooned up like 150 pounds, and now he's getting back into shape. I mean, every single person, like even championship championship level fighters. That's what's amazing, is like they are real human beings. And that's one of the, Connor is magic, was that he was like creating this illusion almost of like he's made of something different. He's something different. He's not even human. He's something more special. But ultimately, that's what's even more magical about it, is that he is just like any one of us. He's just doing the work, and he's built himself up into his place. And Khabib, same thing. He's built himself up into a place where now he's 27-0, and not a fucking lightweight on this earth has been able to do more than maybe a round of damage to him. And even that, like he's absolutely incredible, and the dedication it takes to become one of these guys, Jesus Christ. So, damn, I rambled plenty long on that. I thought I was gonna go a little bit faster, boys and girls, but that's most of the time that I even have, which is good because I don't really have much to say this week. I just thought that was fun. I had some people that wanted me to address UFC 229 because obviously I've been hyped on it for a minute. And so I thought I'd do that. Real quick, I'm wearing a hat in my own house because we don't have heat right now. So that's, what's going on here. If you guys have questions about that, I know some people are going to be like, what the fuck is he wearing a hat indoors? Well, it's basically like 60 degrees in my house right now. So this is what happens when your heating system is being replaced in your apartment. And I'm fine with it. And, I like the cold. Bring it on. I like a challenge. Give me the coldest. I want the coldest living room you ever had. See, I get inspired from it. Fuck all the heat. I'll take a fucking cold living room, and I'll chop wood myself, and I'll start a fire with. I'll punch the wood into splinters, and then I'll fucking snap my fingers into kindling. I do a pretty mediocre Irish accent. Or Conor McGregor, at least. There's that one for you. But yeah, it's been a wild time. My hip's been a little jacked up, just a little personal stuff here. I've been trying to figure out what I did wrong. I think like as you peel back the layers, this has been my experience as a parkour athlete. And again, this is like why I think this has always been my take on parkour. As I've matured, I thought parkour, this is why I think fighting is so cool and parkour is also so cool, is because parkour is sustainable if you want to practice it that way. Let me preface this whole thing by saying that. I think parkour is a sustainable activity. It doesn't have to be anything. It can be whatever you want to make it. It's a beautiful art form. It's a beautiful interaction with nature. It's teaching you how to fucking be one with your environment or try to overcome, they say overcome obstacles and stuff, but really for me, it's more of like a dance with obstacles and this ability to flow with your environment. Not necessarily, it's not all domination of the environment, but it's complementary. Again, it's yin and yang. The obstacles are the yin and you're the yang. They're fucking just being buildings and shit. And you're like you're making beauty out of what is basically just kind of a building it for a while. For most of its time, it's just rocks and brick and wood and shit. But now it's going to be that plus human being expressing himself. So it becomes art. It becomes a beautiful thing. But with it being all those good things and with it being all these things, there's also this potential for glory. And I've always been in the camp where I don't want to rob parkour or try to dictate what people do with parkour. Like I just don't feel like it needs to be done. I don't feel like I feel like it's just whatever you want it to make it, and I want to always leave that door open. I think that's more important than trying to control the narrative of what parkour history is, for me at least, because for me, I came into it with people trying to tell me one thing, and I've been able to do some things differently. And I think that's what it's been given for me, is it's become an artistic outlet. And so if you're having an artistic outlet, you're doing weird shit. You're changing the game. You're trying to innovate. You're trying to do things differently. You're not trying to necessarily do things as they were done, like the old way. It's important to do that, right? I listened to a lot of podcasts before I tried to do this shit. I watched and learned all the basics as much as possible before I tried to go balls deep in my own training. You know, you got to be smart about it. There's a difference between, you know, what is it? The Dunning-Kruger effect or some kind of the effect where you think that you're hot shit, but you're not at all. And then you start to learn something and then you're like, oh, then you find out you're not hot shit. But then the more you learn, then you actually become hot shit. But then you probably don't have the hot shit personality because you know how much work it takes. Dunning-Kruger. That's a Dunning-Kruger effect, I think. But anyhow, with all that, what I'm getting at is that parkour, I think, shares this glory seeking, or this, you know, I'm not glory seeking necessarily, but because that sounds a little bit more self-aggrandizing and egotistical but like this idea that you can inspire others with what you think is artistic and what your vision for like what can be, how you see greatness and how you want to apply yourself. And really what it comes down to is how you can test yourself and how, like, see what you're made of and push yourself to be further and further. And, you know, and ultimately the greats like Muhammad Ali and Conor, you know, if you consider him a great, maybe you don't, but Mike Tyson, like all these people are driven by that force in one way or another, where they're trying to push themselves further and see just how much they can accomplish. And there's always some pushback, you know, there's always a lot of pushback from people, especially, you know, in parkour where people, it's a very communal thing. And it's especially in this early stage where we really think it's important to nurture and protect the community as is. And I think that is important, but there is like this potential for people to use it in a way that, you know, other people have used every other discipline. All these things probably start out in a more pure way, you know, if you want to call it that, but this idea is also pure. This idea of pushing yourself further and further. And when you're embracing that path, I think you're faced with the same challenges that these fighters are faced, where you're invariably trading sustainability for a high water mark. You know, it's like I don't know what is it like. It's just you're making a sacrifice. You're making a sacrifice either way, right? So the sacrifice for sustainability is you might not get to see what you were truly capable of. You might never get to know what you really could have done on your best day. But you never maybe have injuries, and you might just have more training days, and you have all these other benefits that come out of it, and you have, you know, a great practice that you can consistently rely on that, you know, is good to you and you're good to it. Or maybe maybe it takes 25 years to see what you're truly capable of, because you have to put in all that discipline to get to that level without, you know, losing that sustainability. On the flip side, you know, there's people that are going to trade a little bit of that sustainability, be a little bit more Conor McGregor, take a little bit more risk, gamble on it, bet on yourself a little bit, see what you can, see how fast you can rise to the top in some ways. And again, in my opinion, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like, what do you want to do with it? Are you going to be fucking Conor McGregor? Or are you going to be Khabib? Obviously, they both have their pros and cons. You know, they're both wealthy as shit now off this pay-per-view, but they, you know, Khabib lost his honor. Conor's lost his honor. They've both, you know, Khabib's undefeated. Conor's not. You know, whatever it is you value, like, Khabib lives with his parents. Conor lives in a mansion. You know, again, there's different values, right? So, like, whatever you want, figure it the fuck out. And that is a true statement. That's just like, that's literally the culture is Khabib, you know, and in the Dagestani culture, the youngest person lives with parents. He's still got a wife and kids, but they live at home. And I don't know when that ends or if it does, you know, but they help out their parents. Probably. It's probably a huge thing. And there's value to that, you know, there's nothing wrong with the way they're living life. Obviously they're both getting to this epic championship level performance using different tools, but you know, so that's why I try not to, and that's what's weird is like when people jump into one camp, they sometimes want to shit and hate on the other camp. Like, I kind of try to do my best to appreciate both sides. And I think Khabib's amazing. I think Conor's amazing. And I think like a Dom Tomato type who is, probably a little more Conor McGregor-esque. He's throwing himself down line 25, breaking his fucking foot off, jumping down 25, doing a front flip down 25 stairs. But ultimately, and then there's a Max Henry type. Max Henry is like taking a super disciplined approach, and it's taken him probably a little bit longer to like really blossom as an athlete, but look at him now. It's just like he's absolutely amazing. He trains all the time. He gets to train every day. And I don't know, like I don't know exactly how Max Henry sees himself or how Dom Tomato sees himself. But I'm just saying that there's a little less glory in Max's story. Dom's obviously got the fanship and he's inspiring. They're both inspiring people in different ways though. So to shit on either one of them, I think is just the wrong move. But yeah, I've been ranting for a hot minute. I think I've ranted plenty. I want to give two things. One thing is Big Mouth season 2. Watch that shit. If you guys have watched, if you've got Netflix, Big Mouth is, first of all, the first season's hilarious and amazing. I watched end to end. I watched beginning to end in one fucking evening at Kai Willis's. Should to be name dropping here, Kai's apartment. He turned me onto it. That's like, you got to give credit where it's due. Kai turned me onto this show. I fucking fell in love with it. So Big Mouth is amazing. And then the season 2 just dropped like a day or two ago. So that's amazing. It's one of the funniest shows. It's one of the like most in your face. It kind of shows this duality that I've been discussing on this episode a lot. It's got some really funny moments. It's got this really intersectionality of like mainstream like culture issues, whatever's topical these days, and like gender, just again, like these things that are timeless, like these constants that don't seem to go away, where men and women are trying to understand each other and fucking not doing it so well because of their hormones and stuff. So it's really funny. It's kind of a provocative, wild show. It's pretty silly, and if you like this podcast and you like all the dick jokes, you'll definitely like the show because there's plenty of that. But yeah, it's about these youngsters going through puberty. Basically, it's a cartoon. It's ridiculous. So watch Big Mouth. That's a recommendation. I don't recommend shit unless I really mean it. All right. I don't have fucking ads in here hardly at all for you guys because I'm not trying to make this about that. All right. I'm trying to make this about us. And with that said, my second thing is I do have to once in a while, for the good of everybody, I have to just remind you guys that, number one, I really appreciate all you guys listening. I could not thank any one of you enough for helping me get this far. We're at episode 40. This is crazy. We're coming up on a year soon. This has been really good. This has been one of my favorite things. It's been really therapeutic for me to just, have time to think my own things out and interact with people, have these long form conversations, and have a really good reason to do it every week because it's not easy to find time. So I really fucking love all you guys for listening. But I do have to remind you guys that we need your support still. We always need more support. It can never hurt. We got Patreon page going on, and we really appreciate all of it. Shout out to the Patreon supporters for being like basically our biggest supporters right now. We love you guys. Thank you for keeping us going. With your guys' help, we're going to get some more mic stands. We're going to get some, eventually we might be able to get someone to help produce these and get some interaction going, be able to play some videos on things and just do more with the podcast. So big up to all the Patreon subscribers. Big up to all the people listening right now. Big up to everyone that's ever written a review or given us that 5-star review on iTunes. All of you guys are doing the work that we need to help build this shit up. And just keep it going. I want to keep this story going just as much as we all, we're creating our own story right now. So, all the feedback that I've gotten, every one of you guys, just much love. And then also, if you can help, please, spread the word. If you like what you hear, tell people, tell your friends about it. Tell your friends, even if it's not, like you got to listen to every episode. Just if there's one episode that you thought, this is good for my friend, let them know. Or if you have a guest that lives in my area in Colorado and you want to put us in contact with each other, that's really helpful. Even like last week we had Max Lee Abbott on, and like I wouldn't have known to invite him on necessarily unless, you know, our former guests Joe, Max, and Tim Champion all recommended it to me, so that's huge. You know, I want to keep expanding things out, so thanks for supporting the podcast. If you have, you know, the want and the will to do a Patreon subscription as well, I'm gonna make a new tier. I'm gonna give out some merch, and that's that Myrmidon merch, baby, to people in the Patreon tier. So you guys will get some special socks soon. But I just want to thank you guys for helping us grow. That's really how I wanted to end this one. And sorry I snuck up on you with basically an advertisement for our own podcast. But I know if you listen this long, that you're a true lover. You're a true baby, or a true baby, I should say. And we love you guys. Thank you for joining the podcast. I'm going to let you guys play out. Excuse me. I'm going to let you guys listen to that Eelke Kleijn again on the way out. So much love. We'll see you guys next week. Who knows what the fuck's going to happen. We're going to have some guests on again. But it's been really fun just to chat with just us. Just you and me, guys, you know? We love you. All right. Peace.